Welcome back to Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, and oh boy, I'm not even going to go into explaining last time, because this time I just have to say, the intro cutscene for this chapter contains the single most controversial plot point in the entire game, or rather the single most absolutely hated plot point in the entire game. So just an advance warning about that. I can already pretty much guarantee you the comment section of this video will likely get very, very negative. And I'm already bracing myself for that. I'm going to explain my thoughts on it going in, but one thing that I will say, the localization was fully aware of just how contentious this plot point was, and actually took a pretty considerable amount of effort to try and rewrite a lot of the scenes involving this plot point. Though, I guess it probably didn't succeed, since the majority of people who hate this plot point aren't even aware it was different in the Japanese version. But it actually is. So, I'm going to be going into what elements of these scenes were changed, and what elements were left out of the normal mode script. So yeah, there were a few extended script-related omissions in this as well. Now, it's not going to get very extensive until 3.13. 3.12 does have one fairly big localization difference, though. Anyway, let's get right into it.
Apostle Sanaki's army, with Ike at its head, wins a great victory over Dan at Oribes Bridge.
Inconsistency! Its next goal is the Riven Bridge, a massive structure that connects the two countries. It's also called Oribes Bridge in Radiant Dawn, because that was its Japanese name, and they forgot they changed its name here.
However, Apostle Sanaki elects not to pursue the retreating Dayan forces. Instead, she petitions King Peleus for permission to pass through Dayan. After waiting for several days, she receives no reply, and Sanaki reluctantly orders a march. Avoiding the heart of Dayan, the army skirts along the mountains and makes its way south.
That's all we'll get for now. There's actually a little bit more detail into the Apostles' army's plan in the extended script. There's a location mentioned there that's never mentioned anywhere else. So yeah, at the end of the last chapter, Micaiah collapsed, and she was starting to lose her foresight abilities. We'll find out exactly why that's been going on at the very end of this part. This is all leading up to something. Yeah, so at this point, Soph is pretty much fed up with Peleus, and I'm sure most players are too. Peleus has a lot more to apologize for at this point, too. It's kind of interesting that they have mundane doctors in this universe, considering they also have full-on healers. Of course, you want her on the front lines again. I actually feel like the music in this scene should have been different. Really, the music should have cut out here. The music will be changing later, though. Even Toronio agrees. And he's one of the most patriotic people here. In the extended script, she actually says, "Why are you bending the knee to commoners?" We knew Peleus was hiding something big, it seems like this is it. So I guess Bednion intends to fully destroy Daein if he doesn't cooperate. Actually, it's a little more complicated than that. And here it is. So, this is the point that many people really dislike about Part 3. Remember that Almeida said those lines though, that will actually be important later. And so, flashback time. I find this guy incredibly creepy, just those blank eyes. Before we get into the whole controversial blood pack thing, one interesting bit of lore is explained here. / game mechanics as well. So the Rewarp Staff, this is actually an item from Thrakia 776. This was its first appearance in the series since then. Just like in Thrakia 776, this lets the user warp themselves pretty much wherever they want. It's not quite as powerful, it can't let you warp anywhere on the map, but it still has a pretty high range. Unlike Thrakia though, you can't ever get your hands on a rewarp staff of your own. Now a cool detail in the extended script is that Lekain there also adds to this. Once this enters the mass production phase, Bednion's mage armies will be all but unstoppable. It's not really a necessary detail to bring up, but I think it's actually just a cool touch. Because yeah, imagine an entire army of mages being able to teleport wherever they want to. Especially since Bednion's army has some of the best mages in the continents. So, this line is also kind of interesting. So, Cuntopia, a website that does a lot of translations and covers a lot of localization changes, in their post about the localization change involving the Black Knight's warp powder malfunction, they actually pointed out that the term here completely exhausts whoever uses it. Now, in Japanese, this is the exact same wording that the Black Knight uses when he explains to Ashnard that his warp powder exhausts him when he uses it. So, it's actually interesting. They make the rules of warp powder extremely clear, which makes it even more bizarre that they'd resort to that explanation for the Black Knight surviving. So I kind of feel like the idea behind this is that warp powder would make you unable to move for a turn if you used it. Of course, in Heroes, the Black Knight is able to attack after warping with it, so yeah. Why is that random message still here? Also, this is, bizarrely enough, still in the Japanese version. You'd think this would be a localization edition, but it's not. But we are going to get into a localization change soon. Either that, or it's something that was cut out of the normal mode scripts. Or at least changed. So the localization made actually a pretty big screw up here. I applaud the rest of the localization's changes in this scene, but this line, they actually messed up. So, he's saying the false apostle, i.e. Sanaki, is the one who raised the army of subhumans. However, this is implied to have happened before Sanaki joined up with the Laguz Alliance, this scene I mean, which means that Lekain should not be referring to the false apostle here at all, because this was before they even started calling her the false apostle. And again, this is implied to have happened back when the Laguz Alliance was on their own, because yeah, Daein entered the war back in 3.6, long before Sanaki got involved with the Laguz Alliance, so he really should not have been mentioning her here. Anyway, that's actually a localization mistake. The rest of the localization changes in this scene, though, did have basis in the Japanese version. So, in the extended script, Peleus, instead of just saying you came here to make threats, he's saying, are you declaring war on us? Because that does sound a lot like what Lekain is doing here. Except it's something a bit more sinister than that. Now, in the extended script, this wasn't a treaty. It was a 1 billion gold loan from Bednion to help with Daeon's reconstruction, and offered as compensation for the occupation army's atrocities during Part 1. I like that, and it also makes a little bit more sense why Peleus would go along with it. He seems a lot stupider in this version, though he comes across as very stupid in both versions of this scene. This whole detail is pretty much the same. Peleus signed the document, not realizing how suspicious it was, and... So, I was originally planning to make a joke here, saying, seriously, Peleus, you saw nothing suspicious about the fact that you had to sign it in blood? But guess what? In the extended script, Lekain says almost exactly that right now. He actually outright tells Peleus, come on, you had to sign this contract with your blood, you really didn't think that was suspicious? Oh no. Why am I not surprised? I think I'm going to have a heart attack and die of not surprise. Peleus, I expected more from you. I know you owe a lot to Izuka, but really? Him being evil was so obvious, I can't believe you were this dumb. So this explanation of what the Blood Pact is and how it works is the same in both the normal and the extended script, and the localization didn't alter any of it. However, look very carefully at the image in the background here. It might explain a few things. Again, some details in that story are actually important. You can probably figure out why. But also the fact that he describes it as spreading like a contagion, that's also significant. So all of this is the exact same, except for one detail. This thing right here. This was actually localization added. This thing about having spies everywhere. They kind of had to make this situation a little bit more airtight, because they felt like there was an easy out in the Japanese version that they had to seal up. So yeah, let me get this straight. Lekain has literally magic blackmailed Peleus into complying with the Senate. In both versions of the script, Soth just says, oh, this is a load of crap, really. However, Micaiah's fortune-telling powers happen to miraculously come back right now just to conveniently confirm that this is not a bluff. So what's coming up is actually a really big localization change. Not so much a change as an addition. In the Japanese version, this is where this scene ends. The localization, however, adds a lot of extra dialogue right now. I'm glad they added this line to show that Soth isn't entirely okay with this, because in the Japanese version, he changed his tune way too quickly. And this is the really significant change in this scene. Micaiah's entire attitude towards the Blood Pact was absolutely flipped on its head in the English version. In the Japanese version, Micaiah was almost entirely resigned to her fates. She didn't even try and fight against this. In the English version, she actually encourages everyone not to lose hope and directly find a way to stop it. It's a very interesting change. And for the most part, I think it works, but there's one big problem with it, and that was actually not so much an inconsistency with her original Japanese characterization, but rather a clash with a different localization edition that they made in this very same chapter. This is why you have to be very careful when you add things on a localization. This line, though, is a lot like the localization addition to the Black Knight Survival. It is based on details that did exist in the Japanese version. In the ending cutscene for this chapter, Peleus is shown searching in the Royal Library trying to find a way to break the curse. This detail is in the Japanese version, and it doesn't have any foreshadowing there. It does in the localization, so that's at least good. Now, this line is also stated in the Japanese version a bit later on. The whole thing about delaying the Empress to look as if we're obeying the Senate, that is always present. And with that, we end that scene and go to the base. So, I've got a lot to say about this. So when I first played Radiant Dawn, I actually really enjoyed most of its story. I can't remember fully how I reacted to the Blood Pact, but I didn't particularly mind it back then. So, the years passed, and I'd seen a lot of people online who had really negative things to say about this game's story, and I didn't really understand why. I always loved the game's story. Then I played this game again recently on hard mode, in fact, this very year. It's been almost exactly 10 years since Radiant Dawn first came out in Australia, so I thought, you know what, maybe now that I'm older, maybe I might fully understand why people dislike the game's story. So I played through the whole game, not just doing gameplay, but also watching every single story cutscene. And to my surprise, this was still the only part of the story when I could fully understand why fans didn't like it. I actually still love everything else about Radiant Dawn's plot, but I can fully see why people don't like this. Obviously, the Blood Pact only exists so that Dayan can get involved in this conflict, and so that Dayan can bend their will to the Senate and be an enemy for this part. That's really the only reason why. And it does also really screw with the whole, what we did in part 1. It renders most of what we did in part 1 pointless because we're now being forced to bend the knee to the Senate again, or because Peleus was a gigantic moron. Although one thing that I do admittedly like is they do deconstruct the whole putting the long-lost heir on the throne. Obviously, someone who's been sheltered their whole life and only found out they were royalty very recently, suddenly getting the throne, not exactly the best fit to lead a country. It's pretty likely that they do something like this, instantly make the dumbest decision possible, so I do actually kind of like that. But yeah, I can fully understand why people don't like the Blood Pact. One thing that I will say is, it's actually far more contrived in the Japanese version, because there are 2 reasons for this localization change, at adding all those lines at the end of that scene. The first is, I think they felt that Micaiah may have come across as well, not a little, very unintentionally unsympathetic in the Japanese version. It very much goes along with the Japanese. I really don't want to be making any cultural assumptions or anything like that, because I have no right to, but it does feel like it goes along with the Japanese idea of shikatanai, or it can't be helped. In a lot of Japanese works, when you're suffering hardship, accepting it and not trying to fight back is considered a sign of great strength, whereas in Western cultures, it's really, really the exact opposite. So having Micaiah directly try and look for hope and look for a way out, it definitely makes her a more relatable character to Western audiences. I can see why they did that. Now, the second reason why that scene is different in the localization is because, in the Japanese version, the Blood Pact didn't even have an escape clause. So, in the next chapter, we're going to see a lot of details that were actually added directly into the localization. I can actually just say now, in the Japanese version, the Blood Pact was almost entirely dropped after Part 3 and completely forgotten. So, obviously, it was just a contrived plot point to make the conflict at the end of this part happen, and once that conflict didn't need to happen anymore, it was instantly brushed aside and totally forgotten, except for one boss conversation later on, so I'll be explaining that as we go ahead. But here's the thing with the Blood Pact overall. Yeah, I fully understand that it's not a great plot point, but I don't think it completely ruins Part 3. I think a lot of fans are too keen to look at only the negatives of Part 3, specifically this, and not the positives. I still think that the opening half of Part 3 is the best way a war has ever been depicted in any game in the series. And one other moment that I love, that I think is very underrated, the conversation with the villagers, the base conversation back in 3.9. Very rarely do you get to see the civilian perspective on a war like that in a Fire Emblem game. And I feel like it's the over-focus on moments like this. I mean, yeah, I understand, this plot point is dumb, we get it. But everyone knows that, and why don't people focus less on the negatives and more on what Part 3 did right, which I actually feel there is a lot of things Part 3 did do right, and if we just look at the things it did wrong, we miss all that. So anyway, that's been my rant on that, and now it's time for the bass, and this bass music does not fit this bass at all. So before I do anything, I'm going to go into info, because we have a ton of info conversations here, including one that's very special, and this is that thing I was talking about where the localization kind of tripped on themselves a bit, but I'll be explaining that later. So yes, all base conversations were the same in the extended script, so presumably this detail still exists even in the Japanese version, meaning that the stuff that they added with Micaiah, not unprecedented. Peleus is still looking for a way to break the Blood Pact. At least Peleus actually realizes what he did wrong. Well, I mean, he didn't know, but he really should have guessed, considering how Izuka was acting. And we get yet another Master Crown. This is a running theme of these base conversations. Most of the times we switch to a new party, we end up getting a Master Crown. Those are more useful in the Japanese version, like I've said many, many times before. Also, Toronio is officially back in the Dawn Brigade now. I'll explain him a little bit later in this base. I kind of wonder if this was changed in the localization as well, but I'm not entirely sure. I can't really find a script of the Japanese base conversation. Wait a second! I actually do! I probably won't be doing this during the playthrough because it would take way too long, but I just realized the Radiant Dawn art book actually does have the Japanese base conversations right there in it, so I could actually look at that and see if this was changed in the localization. You know what, I'm actually going to go ahead and look at that right after I finish recording this part. So with that, we do get boots. So this game has both boots and celerity, and you can stack them on the same character if you want. And once again, we get more money. This is going to be very, very useful, because there's an item in bargains that I really want to buy here. Yeah, conventional tactics are not going to work against Ike at all. And Micaiah is exhausted and is suffering from certain things that are happening right now. And hey, Nolan actually, gets a base conversation. This is some of the very rare moments of dialogue that the original Dawn Brigade members get outside of Part 1. Oh yeah, the thing about Nolan reading is actually mentioned in his art book profile, so I still find it annoying that Edward, Nolan, Leonardo, and surprisingly enough, Nyla and Raphael are the only new characters to Radiant Dawn who actually get, like, likes, dislikes, and those kind of things listed in the art book. Because everyone else sure as heck could have used that. Cough, cough, Aaron and Laura, cough, cough. Now, this is kind of a good moment. The problem is that Nolan, I believe, doesn't get any base conversations for the rest of this part, so they don't end up telling him. Yeah. But we get a Tomahawk, which is a very nice weapon. And now there's this base conversation. This one was entirely added in the localizations, the only one besides the ones in 3.6 that was. And like I said, this one comes across a little weirdly. I like the fact that Nico comes back, because in the Japanese version, he never appeared again after, in fact, heck, I think 1-1, which is kind of weird. But yes, it's the return of the Adoring Fan. Well, at least these two aren't, actually racist and want to hunt the Lagoos. So, if they ended this conversation here, it would have been fine. But instead, they did this. This specifically. This line right here. Micaiah pretty much resigns herself to the fact that she'll be considered a villain by everyone, and wants to do any means necessary to save Dayan. Now, this does kind of foreshadow what ends up happening in this chapter's battle more clearly, but one thing that does kind of annoy me about it is the localization additions in the previous scene painted Micaiah as the optimistic, let's not give up, let's always find hope. And now suddenly she's being, if I have to become a monster to save Dayan, that's what I'll do. It's a very stark change, and honestly, I feel like the only reason they added this base conversation was because they were aware of fans considering Micaiah a Mary Sue, and they were like, look, she has flaws, so she's totally not a Mary Sue, okay? But really, I said in the Why I Don't Think Micaiah is a Mary Sue video that people often like to throw around the term Mary Sue for characters they dislike without really realizing what it means. I think most Fire Emblem fans nowadays have realized the term Mary Sue doesn't really apply to Micaiah, but here's the thing. Fans didn't dislike Micaiah because she was a Mary Sue. They disliked Micaiah because her characterization was very inconsistent, especially now. And this localization edition only made her even more inconsistent, so if anything, it actually made the problem worse. But that's just how I feel overall. So, anyway, now, we're back with the Dawn Brigade after not seeing them since 3.6, and they're going to be facing a fairly difficult chapter, and oh boy, I have a decision. Who do I give the boots to? I might put that off for a bit, though the temptation to use them on Jill is very high. Okay, Volug should be okay. Let's see who else we have here. So, Nolan. Don't think we need the Iron Axe now. We actually might need that hammer. Though it might be better served on Jill. Okay, Edward's there. He's got the Storm Sword. He's only used it twice, which is actually pretty good because he'll need it this chapter. He's got a few Wind Edges, Caladbolg. Okay, the Worm Slayer's not going to be necessary here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually swap Z-Hawk's Killing Edge over to Edward, because I think at this point, I might actually drop Z-Hawk now. Even though Z-Hawk's normally great, I really want to make sure that the Dawn Brigade members I am focusing on are as strong as possible before 3.13, because I actually am going to need to do something in 3.13. Not necessary, completely unnecessary, in fact. But, anyway, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to be depositing the Torch Staff in the Convoy. I won't need it for the rest of this part, and I'm going to want that in the Convoy for later. Actually, let me just do a quick scan through what's in the Convoy. Alright, the Short Spear. So, Aaron, you need to take Jarod's Short Spear. Probably don't need to use that. I think Edward's okay. Sol should be fine. He has those Beast Killers. Or I could save the boots for a Heron later. It's always difficult figuring out who to use the boots on. Also, yeah, Taronio is back, and in fact, I might give him a new Javelin, because he's going to actually need a Javelin in this chapter. His stats are the same as they were back in 1.6, but they're decent for this point. Not the greatest, but he'll still really help in this chapter. So now, market. I said there was something in bargains that I really wanted, and this is it, the Tuksh. It actually has a decent crit rate among crossbows. It only has 30 might, but that's all I'm going to need for something later on. Now, I'm going to actually give the Tuksh, well, firstly, I'm going to have to send it to storage, but I'm going to give that to Nolan, only because there's something that I need to do with that later on, let's just say. Something kind of amusing. So, Nolan, let's actually have you take that. We are going to be facing some flyers, but I definitely want to save that for 3.13, because I'm going to be doing some hilarious things with that there. As for the rest of what we can get... Okay, they're actually selling silver blades. That's not bad. In fact, I might need one of those for Edward later, but Edward will be getting a really, really good sword in the next chapter, plus I have the Brave Sword. But silver blades are pretty strong. I do like that they're selling some of these very powerful weapons for the Dawn Brigade now. In fact, Aaron will probably need a silver Great Lance. Because, to compensate for the Dawn Brigade's lower levels. Also, silver poleaxe, which looks very cool. Though, that's not really as necessary on Nolan for now. Might want to go ahead and get another one of these, just in case. Jill's almost run out of her. You know what? I might as well buy that for Jill, even though its accuracy has issues. I'm definitely going to want to save these for... Oh, yeah, and the shop does sell longbows occasionally. You're selling killer bows, but no, I won't need that. They are selling both silver knives and silver daggers. Yeah, silver knife, 7 mites. Knives are great in this game, aren't they? Yeah, at this point, the Beast Killer is really all we need. They're also selling Shine, but Micaiah doesn't need anything other than Fanny. And we can't forge at all, but let's see if there's anything that we can sell. Because I might need this gold later. In fact, didn't I buy that earlier? I might as well sell that. Fortune is not the most useful of skills, and it sells for a lot. I'm actually going to go ahead and sell this. Don't know if I'll buy anything more this chapter, but I might need to buy some stuff next chapter. So, I don't think I'll do a ward experience just yet, because everyone I have is not quite at the point of capping stats. Though Edward has cap strength, though on average he still gets better stats by leveling up normally right now. Until he caps one other stat, that is. But now, skills. I like Micaiah still having discipline, because she might need to rank up her light a little bit. Renewal's not the greatest on soft. I think I'll keep Wild Heart on Volug. Now, as for Paragon... Okay, Aaron is one above Edward. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and swap that over to Edward. Though I have to remove... might as well remove Vantage. I mean, I didn't get any use out of Vantage the last time I used Edward, so that's Vantage's punishments. And now, let's see. I can give Jill... No, I can't give Jill Vantage, but I can remove Beast Foe. We won't be needing Beast Foe now. Be sure to continue to hold on to Beast Foe, though. We will be needing it later. I think I'm going to... Actually, wait, that's speed percent, right? Yeah, let's go ahead and give that to Jill. And there isn't much in the way of other skills that I can use, although... Actually, no, wait. Aaron is not going to be taking a lot of damage, so he doesn't really need Resolve. I kind of like having Resolve on Nolan, because his defense is not the greatest, but his HP is pretty nice, so... he does tend to survive for quite a while, even with Resolve on. Though in View, I definitely could use a View on other people at this point. In fact, Toroni would make great use of that. It also means that... So Toroni's going to be spending the majority of this chapter very far away from everyone else, and Imbue will mean that I don't need to send a healer with him, so that's good. I think I'll give him Imbue for now, even though I think we're doing fine on everyone else, and... I think that's everything. How's Micaiah doing for... She probably needs more staves. Let's go ahead and take that mend. That should be alright. Yeah, I will need to be saving money, because I think there's another buyable physics staff in the next chapter, and Micaiah really, really needs physic in the next one, for reasons that you'll definitely be seeing there. And I think Laura's okay on staves for now. Nolan with axes is... Yeah, I think Nolan's axes is fine. Aaron is pretty much fine on lances, I think. Yeah, I think Aaron's fine. He's going to be mostly choke pointing. Might as well convoy your stuff. Wait a minute. No, wait, I bought a silver great lance for Aaron, so I might as well swap out something for that. Let's go ahead and give him that. Though I will want to be saving that for the next chapter. And Leonardo is fine. So yeah, one thing about Leonardo, in fact, I'll probably explain that when we actually get to it, but Leonardo can one-shot most Pegasus Knights, even untrained, with Luke Nassard, or however you pronounce it. Anyway, no, wait. First, before we move out, support time. Can we rank up anything? No, okay, didn't need to do support time. Let's go. So there are a few changes here in the extended script that I will need to explain. Yes, we're using the general bolt axe strategy. But I love how Torinu closes his eyes here. You can really see in his portrait that he doesn't want to go through with this. This is actually interesting because this implies there might have been another chapter intended here where you play as the Grail Mercenaries, but it was cut, I'm guessing, either for time or for game balance, and I'll explain why I say that in the next chapter. So in the extended script, there was an extra line earlier where I think either Toronio or Soth mentions that the Apostles' army is planning to march into Benyon through the Great Wall of Ivelt, a wall that borders Dain and Benyon. This wall is never referred to in the normal mode script, so kind of weird that it's totally exercised from that version. But I wonder if the Great Wall of Ivelt was in fact the place we were at in Path of Radiance chapter 18. No way, I think that place had its own name. So Micaiah's dialogue here is actually kind of weird considering what the objective of this chapter is. I'll explain that when we get to it. There's actually a line from Soth in the extended script that I think if they kept it, people would have hated Micaiah in this part even more. Soth actually says, "Compared to you, I'm still an immature child," in the extended script here. One of the few extended script lines that I'm actually glad they cut. So, next time, we begin one of my least favorite chapters in the game, and I'll explain why once we get to it.